Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Esch. I'm president of Esch Consulting, coming to you from St. Paul, Minnesota. And welcome to Building a Culture of Safety Accountability. I want to thank you for your full attention. These Zoom meetings and video meetings can be a pain in the butt. And I know online is not ideal. I'd rather be face-to-face with you, but this is way better than nothing. So I'm happy you're here. And I have some things I'm excited to share with you about how to build safety accountability into your workday. My intent is to take about a half an hour here of your time to highlight 3 key tools that you can use to improve communication, lower your risk of injury, and decrease some of the stress you probably currently feel. Now, I know a lot of us in construction are not that inspired by safety programs or risk prevention. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. It's like somebody telling us what to do to be safe, especially right now during the COVID-19 situation. It's like wash your hands, stay 6 feet away, wear your mask. It starts to sound like instructions from your kindergarten teacher. You know, wash your hands, Jimmy. Keep away from the girls, wear your hat every day. We don't like the sound of it, even though we all need to do it. We need to do it. The stuff is very serious right now. Careful was the last thing on my mind as a young boy and a young man. I was born for adventure. I have 3 brothers. We had lots of friends in the backyard growing up here in the Twin Cities. You might think to yourself, well, you know, we're doing fine enough here. Communication is good enough. Safety is good enough. We're doing pretty good. And safety accountability sounds kind of touchy-feely. I don't know. I'd rather be fishing or drinking a beer while fishing. And I enjoy that too. I would like to be having a beer right now fishing. But I'd prefer in this moment to deliver something of real value to you that could make a difference in your life, could possibly save the life of another person. So I say, take the risks, take the right risks, go on an adventure, go on the right adventure, the adventure of safety accountability. What am I talking about? I'm talking about communication, and I'm talking about a particular kind of communication. You might think communication doesn't matter that much. We're doing pretty good. We know what the guy means. You know, it's construction. We're building things. We're tearing things down. Why do I need this stuff? Well, maybe you don't, but maybe you do. And I would propose the ideas that I'm offering you could make your life better at work and at home, right? What I'm going to talk about could help you build a better relationship with yourself, a better relationship with your loved ones and friends, the definite possibility of fewer injuries for you and for others in your company, and less stress. A little bit about my background. So I've been in construction for 20 years as a diamond blade salesman, as a safety consultant trainer, and currently as a safety communication consultant. And I got into this, as many people get into safety, because of a very serious situation, a death that actually happened. I was selling saws and blades and learned one day that one of my customers had a guy that had been killed, cut in the neck while cutting pipe, killed with a diamond blade, cutting with a demo saw. Very tragic, sad accident. Shook me to the core, actually. I thought I used to be a minister. Now I'm selling tools that happened to kill a young man. Very, very sad situation, and hit me very deeply. And I thought, I want to do something to make a difference. And I worked with my brother, the owner of Esch Construction Supply, to design a safety training program for demo saws, especially for companies who are cutting a lot of pipe. I actually trained over 8,000 operators of demo saws, mostly in the Midwest. I learned in all that training that the technique is not enough. It's not enough to know how to not pull the guard back past the stop. how to keep your left arm in front and straight when you're at the pinch point, where to put your back and neck ergonomically, never straight behind the cutting attachment. I learned there was a lot more to it than that. And I learned that communication and the way people were accountable for how they communicated and how they behaved mattered a lot. Started to track certain safety numbers and injuries in the companies where I was working. And I noticed where there was better communication and more accountability, there were fewer injuries and incidents. No surprise. We could all guess that. And for today, we're going to boil safety accountability down to three simple things: trust, power, and talk. TPT. Like this TV channel, TPT. Trust. The way you generate trust with other people matters. Power. The way you use the power you do have matters. And talk. The way that you speak up, even the way you possibly interrupt somebody when needed, matters. So let's take trust, the T. How do you build trust? Working on a job site, working on a crew, in construction. Well, a couple of things, three things. Number one, do what you say every time. If you say you're going to be there at 6 a.m., show up at 5:45, Vince Lombardi time, right? If you say you're going to get the oil changed in the company truck on Thursday by noon, get the oil changed on Thursday by noon. Pretty simple, right? Do what you say every time. But you know what? None of us can do it. Nobody's perfect. We can't do what we say every time. We just can't do it. So when you have a breakdown in what you intend to do, admit the mistake and clean it up. So that's the three. Do what you say as often as you can. And when you don't hit the mark, admit the mistake. And number three, clean up your messes. A little bit more on each of those. Do what you say every time. I know I work really hard to keep my word. And when I break my word, I take it really seriously. If I tell a client that I'm going to deliver a presentation or be at a meeting, and for some reason I can't make it, I have to be in communication. If I forget a meeting and I miss a meeting, that is super, super serious to me. Why? Because my word matters. Because my ability to keep my word is what builds the trust. Same with you. Your ability to keep your word. And I know in construction this is hard. I know that supplies get delivered late. I know that projects get delayed. I know that payment doesn't come on time. You have all kinds of troubles, right? So it's not easy, but it's possible. And when you can't keep your word, when you just can't keep your word, admit it. Admit the mistakes. Now, I hate admitting my mistakes. I would like to be perfect. I was trained in the school of the attempted perfection, and I don't have it. So I don't like to admit that I'm not perfect. But I realize I lose trust in other people if I don't admit my mistakes. You know, you might say, no, if you tell people your mistakes, you lose trust. Eventually, they're going to find out, right? We know nothing really ever completely stays in Vegas. It doesn't. We wish it would some days, but it doesn't. So now if you're making mistakes all day long, you're in the wrong job. You need a new job or a new company, right? If you're making mistakes all day long, you're becoming a safety hazard, either communication mistakes or technical mistakes, right? So I'm not talking about all day long. I'm talking that occasional mistake. When you tell about that mistake to the right people who need to know, and you recommit to doing it right the next time, and you do it right the next time, you gain trust. Actually, they say you have more trust after you've broken your word if you admit what happened and you're aware of why it happened and you make the corrections. You actually build the trust. So I'm going to ask you personally, when you make a mistake, what do? Do you admit it openly to those who need to know every time? Do you admit it openly some of the time? Or do you hide it and try to keep it under the covers? All right, not good, not helpful, not going to build trust. Now, cleaning up your messes. This is a big one. When you make a mistake, that could be a mess. It could be a variety of messes, things that get messy. I'm talking interpersonal messes. It could be the job site too. If your job site's a mess, if your truck is a mess, we all know that's a safety hazard. Keep a neat and clean job site whenever you can. That is a good idea. But I'm talking mostly interpersonal messes. And I made one. I've made plenty. I made one years ago at a company where I worked with a mechanic that was there who made the request of all the salespeople, hey, stop interrupting me to find little parts. I put all the parts in bins. The bins are numbered. I put the numbers on the schematics online. Find your own parts. I cannot be interrupted. The next day, guess what I did? I interrupted him. I went to him. I needed a part. I didn't have time to look at the schematics. I said, hey, I need a spark plug for that TS420 saw. Can I get that spark plug? He said, I can't get it for you, man. Go look at the schematics. Anyway, it was a mess. It turned into a mess. And I realized it was on me. And I had to clean that mess up. I had to eat the humble pie, go to him and apologize and recommit to using the schematics. And it was like a huge victory between the two of us. How often do you clean up your messes? When you do something, when you let someone down, when you do something that's not helpful, useful, or kind, what do? All right, clean up the messes. The second point, build trust is the first. The second one is using your power, and I would say using smart power. Now, some say there's three kinds of power: hard power, soft power, and smart power. Hard power is that old-fashioned my way or the highway. It's heavy on control, huge focus on work, get her done. This is very common in construction, the hard power model of communication. And it has very little focus on relationship, right? And you might feel sometimes that the place you're at, where you're working, or the people you work with, may be using hard power, and maybe you don't love it. Then there's soft power. That would be too much relationship, too much niceness, too much empathy. Nothing's a problem. You can do anything. It's a long leash. It's that hands-off approach to management. There's no accountability. It's not good either. I recommend smart power, where you have a balance of hard power and soft power, a balance of work and relationship, and the awareness of the rank you have. We all have rank, just like the military. There's certain ranking people. And the rank is not only by title, the rank is by personality. I know I was coaching a guy a couple of years ago. He was a classic hard power guy. And the owner asked, can you help me? He's one of my best workers. He's really high functioning, productive worker. But his coworkers don't like him. They don't get along with him, and they don't stay. They leave the company. He was losing workers. So I worked with this guy for a few months and helped him realize that he was using too much hard power, and he had to start using some smart power. He had to balance off the work with the relationship. He was the kind of foreman who would just say to his guys at 5:30 in the afternoon, all right, guys, we got to get her done. All right, man, we got another 3-4 hours of work. And he'd keep guys sometimes 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. These were guys with wives, guys with children. And they often said nothing to him. They'd do the work, but a few weeks later, they'd be gone. Not good. Not good for quality work. Not good for safety. He was fairly productive, but that's not the only thing that you have to be is fairly productive. You got to balance a lot. So I started to help him realize that it would be useful for him to check in with his guys at the beginning of the day when he had a hunch of how much work was going to be needed that day. And he could ask, hey, Billy, can you stay after 4 o'clock? Hey, Ed, can you stay tonight till about 7 or 8? And he'd check in with them. And he started to balance off the hard power with the soft power. And he was using smart power. And his crew still got a lot done. And his crew stayed together. So it was a happy ending. So think about, how do you use your power? How are you relating to others? And you might say, I don't have power. I'm not a foreman. I'm not a soup, not a manager, I'm not an owner. I'm just a worker. You're more than that. Every one of us has a lot of power. Every one of us can make a difference. All right? It doesn't matter what your rank is by your title. It matters how you use the power you do have and how you respect people and balance off sort of a hard power focus on work with a softer power focus on people and taking care of people. So if you are a foreman, if you do have some leadership, make sure you always inform your crew of what you expect of them, or a coworker. And if you show up on a job site and you don't know what's going on and you're a leader, you want to ask more than you want to tell. Find out what's happening first before you instruct people. And whether you're a leader or whether you're a frontline worker, you can show other people that you care about them by just how you treat them, how you talk to them, the tone of voice you use. I think we all know this pretty much by now. I think everybody knows. It's not the actual words we use, it's the tone of voice, it's the body language, right? And you may not even be aware of your tone of voice. Many of us are not, but we can become aware of that. And hold yourself accountable to a higher standard of communication and accountability. So it's just a few things about smart power. It really comes down to knowing yourself and knowing how to best use the power that you do have. And I have a little story about, a sad story for you about a true thing that happened about 10 years ago out in Colorado, where a foreman, a leader of a crew of about 27, was working on a situation. They had a trench, and he changed the angle of the trenching, of the shoring, right? They had some shoring up on this big trench, and he changed it, and he made the angle more vertical. It was first something like this, and he made it more vertical like this a little bit. And everyone knew it was a bad idea. And he didn't discuss it with anyone. There was no conversation. He just said, this is what we're doing. But everybody had a sense this was not right. And of course, they went on that day, they did the work, and the trench collapsed and killed a man, crushed a man. Very tragic. I know the guy who had to go knock on the door of his wife and tell the story. That guy also interviewed all 27 people, and every single one of them said, I knew it was unsafe, but I was afraid to speak up. So because no one spoke up, that man died. Very, very sad. So speaking up and how you use your power in speaking up, how you use the power matters. Everybody has power. Any one of those workers could have asked a question. Now, he may or may not have listened, but anybody could have spoken up and possibly saved that guy's life. So that moves us to the third point, which is talking or speaking up. All right, trust, power, and now speaking up, talking or speaking up. What are some of the challenges you have speaking up? I know it's not easy, and I know a lot of people in construction that we don't hire people mainly because they're great at talking or speaking up. You get hired in construction because you have a strong back, strong shoulders, you can get work done. You can work 10, 12 hours in a row if you have to, 5 days, 6 days in a row if you have to. That's generally why people get hired in construction, because they're physically strong, not necessarily skilled at speaking up or talking, right? And yet more and more, we all need to learn how to speak up and how to talk. So what are your challenges? Maybe you're good at it. Maybe you're great at it. I don't know. But how are you doing at reporting near misses or injuries in a timely fashion? A timely fashion is the key point. I know it's easy to delay that, to put it off, or to feel embarrassed about some of that. But we all know that the more quickly we report injuries and near misses, the better everything runs. And you will actually prevent injuries when you do that consistently. And are you telling your foreman, you're telling your soup or your safety director in that timely fashion and doing it every time? So why is it we are slow to speak up? Why is it we don't sometimes report some things or maybe interrupt somebody doing something unsafely? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One of them is that we just feel like we're too busy, or it's not our business. It's not our job. I got enough going on. Or we might say, I don't want to open a can of worms. You know, that looks like a big can of worms, and I'm afraid of looking foolish. I don't want to do it. You might think, I don't want to wake a sleeping dog. That guy has a temper. That woman has a temper. I'm afraid of an unhappy verbal exchange, right? You might say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, it's relationally safer to do nothing. So I ain't going to fix it. It ain't broke, don't fix it. Usually when someone says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, that means it's broke. I hate to say it, but it often means it is broke. They just don't want to do anything about it. And then how are you using your voice, even though you think, oh, I don't have the rank, I'm not a foreman, not a soup, it won't make any difference. My voice doesn't matter around here. Nobody ever listens to me. They never pay attention to me. If you're saying never and always, words like that, I'm going to ask you to rethink your belief. And I'm going to challenge you that you do have some power, and probably more than you think, especially if you think nobody ever listens to you. I don't think that's true. So what are some other reasons some of us don't speak up? Well, it might be a lack of trust. Like, you know what? I'm not speaking up. I don't trust that guy. I don't trust that woman. We maybe are concerned about retaliation. And I don't want the bad job for the next 6 years. I don't want to be that guy, that safety zealot guy for the next 10 years. It might be lack of support from on-site leaders. Maybe you feel your foreman, your soup would not back you and have your back. Or maybe you don't feel the support from the management or the owners. I'm not sure. Lots of reasons that we don't speak up. It can be risky, right? Have you seen the movie Jerry Maguire? It's one of my favorites. Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. Cruise is a sports agent, and he gets fired from his big-time job, and he's got one client who's not doing that well, Rod Tidwell. And Tidwell is a tough, arrogant complainer. Really, he's a difficult person. But he's the only guy that Jerry Maguire has. So it's an interesting setup. And at one point, Jerry decides to have a courageous conversation with him, and he says, "Hey," he says, "we're friends, right?" And this is right after Rod Tidwell ridiculed Jerry. And then Maguire looks at him. He says, "Hey, we're friends, right, Rod? You know, friends can tell anything, right?" And he says, "Yeah, right, okay, yeah, give it to me, you know." He says, "I'll tell you why you don't have the $10 million paycheck yet, because you're a paycheck player. You play with your head, not your heart. In your personal life, you play with your heart. But when you get on the field, it's all about what you didn't get, who underthrew the pass, who has the contract you don't have, who's not giving you your love. You know what? That is not what inspires people. That is not what inspires people." Wow, he just gave it to him. He says, "Just shut up. Play the game. Play it from your heart, and I will show you the quan. I will show you the money. That's the truth, man. That's the truth. Can you handle it? It's just a question between friends." And then he said, "When they call you shrimp, I'm the one who defends you." Rod Tidwell says, "I don't want to be friends no more." He says, "Fine. And quit using that word quan, man. That's my word. No heart, no heart." He says, "I'm all heart. Mother sucker, I'm all heart." Didn't say sucker, said something else. But that was a turning point for Rod Tidwell. Huge turning point. Boy, you talk about the power of speaking up at the right moment, of using the rank you do have and telling the truth. Now, that was an amazing conversation. A lot of trust and respect between these two guys. And it was the turning point where Rod Tidwell played with his heart, got the 10 million and more, and everything ends well in the end. But speaking up can feel risky, right? We ask how can we do it? Well, I'd say this: make a decision to take the risk to speak up when you need to, and do it with smart power, balancing work goals with relationship needs, and interrupt when it's needed. make that interruption, especially if it's a safety issue. Definitely interrupt. And you should have the support of your foreman and your safety director and the top manager and the owner should all support that. And systematize it. Systematize it, meaning build it into the culture. Hopefully you guys are discussing hazards and risks before every job at the beginning of every day. And one of the companies I work with calls it the ACE drill, ACE, assess, converse, eliminate. And they do the ACE drill every day before the job, talking about the hazards, especially the new hazards. Maybe it's weather, maybe something's changed, every time, every day. And speaking up, you don't always have to speak up with words. You know, you can speak with your actions, by what you do or by what you don't do in the interest of safety, accountability. One time I spoke up with my actions. I was living in Kenya at the time. I was in the seminary, and I was in Nairobi, Kenya, living in a slum, very densely populated slum, one of the few white guys in the slum, 80,000 people. There was occasional violence, and one day there had been a murder, actually. One man killed another man with a stone. Very, very tragic situation, right? About a week later, there was a fight in the marketplace, and it was a guy who had been drinking fighting the shoemaker. I don't know if he made a mistake on his shoes or if the drunk guy was just having a bad day, but he picked a pretty serious fight. And after a couple minutes, a whole crowd gathered. About 40, 50 people were watching these two have a pretty violent physical fight. And the shoemaker was definitely winning because the guy had been drinking, right? And at one point, the drunk guy picked up a rock about that big, good sized rock, and he was going to go to hit the shoemaker with the rock. And I thought, I can see what's going to happen here. He's going to miss the shoemaker. Shoemaker's going to grab the rock and kill him. I just thought, I think that's a possibility. I've got to do something. So when the drunk guy picked the rock up to throw it at him like this, picked it up over his head, I ran in and grabbed the rock from behind his head, pulled it out of his hands. He was not happy with that. He turned around, he took a drunken swing at me, he missed me. I ducked, he landed on my back. I stood up, he flipped off my back and landed in the mud puddle. I kid you not. It was classic. The crowd loved it. This was great. The white guy fighting the drunk guy. This was just awesome. But I was scared. You know, he wasn't that drunk, and there he was in the mud puddle. He got up fuming mad, and I picked up the rock and started to run. Now, if there's one thing you don't want is to be chased by a Kenyan. I look like a distance runner, but I'm not. I was in okay shape, but I did outrun him with the rock in my hands. After about a mile, he stopped chasing me, and I got away. So I interrupted with my actions. You can do the same thing with what you do and with what you say. So when you do interrupt, there's three things that you want to do, especially if somebody is on a job using a tool. You got to get their attention, you got to figure out something to say, and you got to handle the resistance. How do you safely get their attention? Great question. Do you get in the visual field? Do you yell? How much noise is in the background? Get their attention. And then what do you say? And it has to be something better than, hey, dumbass. I know that's a common thing people say in construction. It's not respectful, and it may not get you the long-term results that you want. So you want to say something a little more respectful, like, hey, time out, or hey, would you be willing to stop? Or hey, can we figure out a different way to do that? Or hey, I got your back, man. Let's rethink that. We is always a good word. How can we work together? Hey, can we talk for a minute? How about just that one? Hey, can we talk for a minute? Then the third part is resistance. They're probably going to say, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've done this 1,000 times, buddy. Back off. Who are you? Right? It's a very common response. So you got to handle the resistance. So you got to have 3, 4 things to say, like, I want to help you. Like, I'm worried about this situation. Like, I know you've done this 1,000 times, and I'd like to see you do it a different way. Or, I don't want to escalate higher than you and I. Let's figure this out. It's a lot of different things you can say. It's a whole workshop on it, but think about that. Get the attention. What do you say to them, and how to handle resistance? We're talking about TPT, trust, power, and talking. All right. How do we build trust? Do what you say every time, which you can't do. So when you drop the ball, admit your mistakes, clean up your messes, do it consistently. Power, use the smart power. The hard power, the my way or the highway, that thing's becoming a dinosaur. The soft power doesn't work. You want to have a balance of the hard and the soft, and I call that smart power. And third, speaking up. There's lots of reasons we don't, lots of good reasons why we're afraid to, and lots of reasons and lots of ways that we can speak up by our words and by our actions. So what will you do with this information? I want you to take at least one idea back to your job site tomorrow or later today and use it. Take one idea, one thing that you will practice. I thank you for your time. Again, it's Tom Esch, Esch Consulting. Hope to meet you in person one day. Until then, take care, be safe, love like Jesus, and wash your hands like Pontius Pilate. Thank you. Take care.